before the real-time strategy genre even had a name, there was Command and Conquer. Released in 1995 by Westwood Studios, it didn't just popularize real-time strategy, it helped invent the language of it. With crisp controls, asymmetrical factions, and iconic base building, C&C became the blueprint for a generation. But what truly set Command and Conquer apart wasn't just its gameplay, it was its world building. From ancient secret societies to alien crystals, from Cold War what-ifs to rogue artificial intelligences, Command and Conquer wove together a multiverse of timelines, connected, fractured, and sometimes hilariously contradictory, thanks in no small part to the franchise's favorite narrative tool, time travel. This is the first in a short series exploring the Command and Conquer timeline, one of the most complex and overlooked sci-fi universes in gaming. In this episode, we'll cover the Tiberium Saga, a dark and apocalyptic vision of Earth slowly being consumed by alien matter, as humanity is caught between authoritarian militarism and radical techno-cultism. Welcome to Episode 1, The Rise of Tiberium. Our timeline begins in the deep past, long before nations, before cities, before even the concept of war. According to ancient texts, after humanity's fall from grace, Adam and Eve bore two sons, Kane and Abel. Abel offered the finest of his flock to God. Kane gave only ordinary crops. God favored Abel. Kane, consumed by jealousy, lured his brother into a field and killed him. When confronted, Kane lied. But God knew. And so, Kane was cursed. The earth would no longer yield for him, and he would be doomed to wander forever. Banished east of Eden, Kane departed into the land of Nod. In Hebrew, Nod means wandering, but in time it came to mean something far more. According to the Brotherhood of Nod's teachings, Kane did not perish. He endured, and in the ages that followed, he watched as early humans stumbled through the dirt, building mud huts and scratching at survival. Disgusted by their ignorance, but perhaps curious, Kane stepped from the shadows and gave them tools, fire, and thought. He guided them not as a god, but as a teacher. Civilizations began to rise, and so did legends, whispers of a marked man who never aged. The Brotherhood of Nod claims direct descent from Kane. Historians dismissed these claims until they stumbled upon what they could not explain. Tombs in Mesopotamia adorned with scorpion carvings, the symbol of Nod. Ancient tablets depicting not just Cain and Abel, but prophecy. And always the same figure, silent, watching, untouched by time. The rest of history proceeded as we would recognize. World War I begins and ends, the evil man with a weird moustache rises, starts the Second World War, and is then defeated. It was in 1946 that history began to diverge from what we would know. As the world struggled to rebuild, one man resolved to prevent it from ever happening. Albert Einstein, working in secret at Trinity, New Mexico, built a time machine. He traveled back to 1924 just outside Landsberg prison, where a man recently released from a failed coup, the evil man with the mustache, was quietly walking free. Einstein greeted him with a handshake and erased him from history. Returning to his own time, Einstein was asked what would happen next. He simply said, "Time will tell. Sooner or later, time will tell." With the moustache man erased from history, the balance of power shifted. The Soviet Union, unchecked by any German rival, grew into a global juggernaut. Under Joseph Stalin, it amassed 14 million troops, 7 million security personnel, and over 200 million agents embedded across the globe. From Moscow to Karachi, Khartoum to Vancouver, the red grip began to tighten. Einstein had prevented one war, but unleashed another. This marked the beginning of Red Alert. We'll be exploring the full Red Alert storyline in a dedicated episode, so for now, we'll only touch briefly on this alternate World War II. Stalin, influenced by visions, perhaps dreams, perhaps something darker, believed he was destined to rule the world. But he was not alone. At his side stood two advisors, Nadia Zelenkov and a man known as Kane. Silent, watchful, always there. While Stalin plotted world domination, Kane whispered in his ear, guiding the Soviet war machine from the shadows. The world thought Stalin ruled with an iron fist, but the truth is, he was a puppet. and behind the curtain, Kane was pulling the strings. The Soviets launched full-scale invasions across Asia and Europe. The Allies, fractured and underpowered, were forced into desperate defense. But with the help of Einstein and an extremely gifted commander, the Soviets were eventually routed from Europe. Moscow was besieged and Stalin was killed. The Second World War was over. At this point, the timeline would split yet again. In one timeline, the Allies installed Alexander Romanov to rule the Soviet Union, believing he would be easy to control. But in this timeline, things turned out very different. In the post-war peace treaty, the Allies imposed strict conditions. The Soviet Union was forced to disarm nearly all offensive military capability, retaining only enough to defend its fractured borders. Soon after, the Soviet Union collapsed, fragmenting into 15 independent states. Russia remained the largest and most powerful among them, but the Red Empire was gone. As for Stalin's mysterious advisor, the man known only as Kane, he vanished without a trace. His final act, if rumors are true, was the execution of Nadia Zelenkov, Stalin's closest confidant. After that, nothing. No one ever found him. No one ever truly looked. In 1994, a US congressional investigation into several major defense contractors uncovered something unexpected and unsettling. Buried beneath layers of corporate paperwork and shell companies were covert financial links to a shadowy organization calling itself the Brotherhood of Nod. Until then, Nod was seen as little more than a fringe cult, obscure, decentralized, and politically irrelevant. But now, evidence suggested it had quietly embedded itself into the global defense industry, influencing weapons research, supply chains, and black market arms deals. No one could explain how such a group had gained such reach, or why so little was known about its leadership. Then, in 1995, the world changed forever. A meteorite struck near the Tiber River in Italy, seemingly ordinary, until scientists discovered something embedded inside, a glowing green crystalline substance. It would come to be known as Tiberium. According to Brotherhood of Nod propaganda, this event had been foretold by Kane himself, proof, they claimed, of prophecy fulfilled. At first, Tiberium appeared almost organic. It sprouted like a plant, pushing through the soil in strange, pod-like clusters. Underground, it spread like roots, leaching minerals from the earth and forming rich crystalline deposits above ground. To early observers, it seemed miraculous, self-growing, metal-rich, and cheap to harvest. It was hailed as a revolutionary resource, profitable, abundant, harmless. But Nod saw more. They claimed Tiberium was the next step in human evolution, a tool to reshape the world. While governments hesitated, the Brotherhood acted. They funded their expansion by harvesting Tiberium, perfecting extraction methods, and cornering the global supply. Within months, Nod controlled 49% of the world's Tiberium, nearly double that of the United Nations-backed Global Defense Initiative. Their economic power skyrocketed, so did their influence. But the miracle didn't last. Tiberium revealed its true nature. Forests near the impact site mutated. Trees twisted into bulbous, fleshy stalks, known as blossom trees, that release spores into the air, spreading Tiberium like a virus. The crystals choked the life from soil and plants, draining not only metals, but nutrients. Worse still, it was deadly to humans. Tiberium exposure led to horrific poisoning, cellular breakdown, and irreversible genetic damage. The world was no longer facing a mineral revolution. It was facing a slow ecological collapse. And at the center of it all was Kane. By the mid-1990s, the Brotherhood of Nod no longer operated in the shadows. Under Kane's direction, the organization began openly contending with the Global Defense Initiative across political, media, and military fronts. While Nod had long been skilled in covert influence, asymmetric warfare, and propaganda, the scale of its new operations was unprecedented. Fueled by its near total control of Tiberium-rich regions and a growing economic empire, Nod began consolidating territory, militarizing rapidly, and absorbing the resources of sympathetic states. Armed Nod supporters launched regular operations in Africa, particularly in Niger and Gabon, and across Eastern Europe west of Russia, with only a few notable holdouts, such as Ukraine, resisting their spread. The GDI responded in kind, escalating counterintelligence efforts and regional interventions. Then came the attacks. A wave of urban bombings swept across major cities. The grain trade center in Vienna became the 17th known target. Simultaneously, reports of coordinated terrorist activity emerged from Slovenia, traced directly to Nod cells. The international community could no longer remain neutral. The United Nations Security Committee entered a closed emergency session. Their decision, the Global Defense Initiative, was granted full military authority to engage Nod. The world was now at war. With the UN vote authorizing open war, Kane moved swiftly. In Africa, armed Nod loyalists assembled in Niger and Gabon. From there, they advanced into Libya, removing local leaders with suspected GDI sympathies. The most notable among them was Nikumba, a minor tribal figure whose execution sent a clear message. Libya fell quickly, becoming a strategic stronghold. From Libya, Nod pushed into Egypt, overrunning GDI-aligned forces and occupying the region. They then struck GDI prison facilities in Sudan, liberating captured Nod operatives and seizing control of the country. With Sudan secure, Nod turned its attention to Chad, where a civil war raged. Nod reinforced its local supporters, crushed pro-GDI villages, such as the one near Hajar, and tilted the conflict in its favor. To preempt GDI movements in Nigeria, Kane's personal commander led a rapid assault through neutral Algeria. At the same time, a rising Nod officer executed a flanking attack through Mali, striking GDI-held Mauritania, home to key GDI air bases. Nod swept across Western Africa. GDI, in desperation, had installed nuclear devices in Nigeria, Benin, and the Ivory Coast to pressure local governments. But Nod launched a series of daring raids, capturing the nuclear detonators and forcing the surrender or defection of all three nations. Then came a masterstroke of psychological warfare. Nod infiltrated the Central African Republic, stole an advanced GDI Orca assault craft, and used it to attack a civilian village, blaming GDI. Public opinion turned, and the Brotherhood took the region. In Gabon and Cameroon, Nod destroyed entire villages near rich Tiberium veins, claiming they were spreading contamination. With the land cleared, Nod extracted the Tiberium and drove GDI out. But inside the Brotherhood, cracks were forming. Seth, Nod's African commander, had secretly planned a suicidal assault on the Pentagon. Kane discovered his betrayal and in a swift execution removed Seth from power. Kane now commanded all African operations personally. From there, the Brotherhood pushed into Zaire, using abandoned GDI bases to wipe out enemy forces. They reclaimed the Nile, repelled GDI gunboat raids, and reconquered Egypt, brutally suppressing local support for GDI's brief democratic regime. With Egypt secured, Nod launched a southward blitz. GDI's secret research facilities in Angola and Tanzania were targeted, one developing the Mammoth tank, the other researching the ion cannon. Nod raised the Mammoth lab and assassinated the ion cannon scientists before they could evacuate. Still, they were too late. The Mammoth tank entered the field, and worse, the GDI's ion cannon was now operational. But Kane had a plan. In Botswana, GDI maintained an open link to its orbital weapons array. Nod forces infiltrated the base, stole the access codes, and seized control of the ion cannon's interface. Now, they had a way to turn GDI's most powerful weapon against them. It is believed Nod planned to use the ion cannon against a famous Western landmark such as Big Ben or the Eiffel Tower, although it seems that the GDI was able to rout the Nod hackers from their internal computer system. By this point, Nod controlled all of Africa, except one last bastion, South Africa. Kane's solution was simple: crush resistance and build a new Temple of Nod atop the ashes of GDI's final holdout. Cape Town fell, the GDI presence in Africa was annihilated, but all was not lost. The European campaign began in the north with an amphibious assault on Nod-occupied Estonia. GDI forces secured a beachhead, overran a major Tiberium refinery, and forced Nod out of the country. From Estonia, GDI pressed south. With Nod's SAM sites in Latvia destroyed, air power was unleashed across the Baltic. Latvia and Lithuania fell shortly after. But the next move would determine the course of the entire war. With Commander Mark Jameson Shepard reassigned to the UN, operational command passed to James Solomon. He faced a pivotal decision: strike west into Poland or push east through Belarus to relieve Ukraine. Solomon chose Belarus. GDI forces launched a deep strike into the region, recovering stolen nuclear rods from a Nod facility. At the same time, smaller detachments crossed into Poland to secure additional materials and provide limited support to the city of Bialystok, which was resisting Nod control. With the region secured, GDI reinforcements surged into Ukraine, where Nod forces had laid siege to a key defensive base. The arrival of GDI armor turned the tide. Nod was driven back, and Ukraine officially joined the GDI alliance. Meanwhile, Nod forces had overrun Germany, advancing from Austria, Denmark, and Poland. Entire cities fell, but Nod had stretched too far. GDI struck back, reinforcing two besieged German bases with troops flowing in from Poland and Ukraine. In a series of brutal engagements, GDI forces crushed the Nod advance, liberated Germany, and advanced into Denmark. Within weeks, GDI had reclaimed the heart of Europe. The Brotherhood was bloodied but not broken. With Germany reclaimed and Nod pushed out of Denmark, the Global Defense Initiative set its sights on Central Europe. The next target, the Czech Republic. The offensive began with a precision commando raid on a major Nod airbase. With air power neutralized, GDI ground forces swept in, driving Nod out and securing the nation. But just as momentum was building, disaster struck, not on the battlefield but in the media. A report circulated by a Nod agent accused GDI forces of massacring civilians in the Polish town of Białystok, claiming they had been suspected of Tiberium smuggling. The report spread rapidly. The United Nations, reacting to public outrage, launched a formal investigation and cut GDI funding. The political backlash was severe and precisely what Kane had intended. Despite the blow, GDI commanders held the line. In Austria, a lightly defended outpost near Salzburg came under heavy attack. GDI reinforcements arrived just in time, wiping out the Nod base supplying the offensive. Meanwhile, in Slovakia, a different kind of battle was being fought. Dr. Ignacio Mobius, one of the world's leading Tiberium researchers, had established a field hospital for local civilians suffering from Tiberium exposure. As word spread, the Slovakian population began to turn against Nod. Mobius became a target, but a GDI task force successfully defended his position, repelling wave after wave of Nod attacks. From there, the GDI prepared to strike into Hungary. Leveraging their naval superiority, GDI deployed armoured gunboats up the Danube River, aiming to destroy strategic Nod installations from the water. Ground troops cleared the way, eliminating defensive turrets along the banks. But Kane was prepared. Hidden along the river, Nod had constructed one of their deadliest new weapons, the Obelisk of Light, a towering energy cannon capable of vaporizing armor in seconds. As the gunboats neared their target, they were obliterated. The plan had failed. But GDI did not retreat. Instead, ground forces advanced, assaulting the river base head-on under direct fire from the obelisk. The cost was high, but the offensive succeeded. The base fell, and with it, the Brotherhood's grip on the region. With the Danube under GDI control, Nod forces were swept from Hungary. With Hungary secured, the tide of the European campaign was shifting. The long shadow of the Białystok scandal finally lifted. After months of investigation, the United Nations cleared the Global Defense Initiative of wrongdoing. Funding was fully restored. GDI now stood unchallenged across most of continental Europe. The European campaign was nearing its end. Thanks to Agent Delphi, GDI had discovered the likely location of Kane, overseeing operations at a Nod bio-research facility in FR Yugoslavia. At the same time, GDI had finally regained full control of the ion cannon recently compromised by Nod hackers. With orbital firepower back online, GDI launched a strike. The bio-research complex was leveled. Reports flooded in. Kane was dead. But it wouldn't be the last time GDI thought so. Surveillance soon confirmed that Kane had evacuated the site prior to the strike. Meanwhile, Nod forces were in full retreat, falling back toward Bosnia. GDI pursued, intercepting and annihilating an entire Nod convoy on the road into the Balkans. Yugoslavia fell. Nod's last stand was at its nuclear-armed Temple of Nod in Bosnia, believed to house Kane himself. GDI forces launched a full-scale assault through minefields, heavy artillery, and the threat of nuclear retaliation. The temple sustained critical damage. Then the ion cannon fired. The temple was obliterated and every Nod defender in the region was killed. Bosnia, the final European stronghold of the Brotherhood, had fallen. GDI declared total victory. Both sides believed Kane had perished in the blast. The First Tiberium War had reshaped the planet. GDI stood victorious but changed. Once answerable to the United Nations, the Global Defense Initiative was now an independent superpower. The UN slowly faded into irrelevance. In time, GDI would build the GDSS Philadelphia, an orbital command station, and assume military dominance across Europe and North America. National armies became redundant. GDI answered to no one. As for Nod, it fractured, but not for long. In Africa, a cunning figure emerged, General Hassan. Broadcasting from Benghazi through the Nod news network, Hassan declared himself the rightful leader of Nod. Publicly, he remained defiant against GDI. Privately, he worked with them, executing rivals and keeping the Brotherhood fractured and contained. This fragile peace would hold for much of the 2000s and 2010s. But in the 2020s, chaos would once again begin to resurface. The crystal's unchecked expansion began to warp the environment itself. Earth's temperate, subtropical, and tropical zones were devastated. Forests died. Croplands turned to dust. Deserts expanded. Ion storms, violent chaotic tempests triggered by Tiberium reactions, lashed the land with lightning and static interference, reducing entire regions to uninhabitable hellscapes. New forms of life emerged, Tiberium-based flora and fauna. Mutated canines driven by aggression stalked the periphery of crystal fields. Vein plants spread like tumors across the land, devouring any vehicle or structure that dared pass over them. The human cost was catastrophic. Cities were abandoned, nations depopulated, civilian governments collapsed under the weight of ecological disaster. Humanity fled toward the poles, toward the Arctic and Antarctic, where Tiberium spread more slowly. GDI launched mass evacuation campaigns, relocating populations to secured zones. But not everyone made it out. Those left behind, exposed for too long, began to change. Over the course of a few short years, mutations became common. Skin hardened, organs failed. Generations were born disfigured. These outcasts, feared by both GDI and Nod, took on a new name: the Forgotten. Driven underground, the Forgotten formed tribes, sometimes terrorist, sometimes anarchist. But by the early 2030s, they began to unite under a single voice: Tratos, a wise and enigmatic mutant who would one day play a critical role in the war to come. Inside Nod, General Hassan, GDI's puppet ruler, had kept the fractured Brotherhood on life support. But opposition was growing. One man refused to submit: Anton Slavik, a charismatic Black Hand general from Serbia. Devoted to Kane's vision, he had become a threat to the balance of power. GDI requested his elimination, and Hassan complied. Slavik was captured, falsely accused of espionage, and sentenced to public execution via lethal injection, live on global television. But death never came. At the final moment, Black Hand commandos, led by Oksana Christos, stormed the execution site. Slavik was extracted and brought to the Montauk, a subterranean command vehicle. He executed his traitor, reclaimed his command, and disappeared into Libya. The world believed he was dead. That's exactly what he wanted. With tactical support from CABAL, Nod's AI war advisor, Slavik regrouped in Libya, defeating Hassan's elite guard. Then he turned to the real battlefield: propaganda. Hassan's greatest weapon was media control. So Slavik stormed Nod's Benghazi broadcast station, seized its signal, and declared the Brotherhood reborn. One by one, Nod factions rallied. The next target, Cairo, Hassan's seat of power. But before striking, Slavic freed a former rebel commander and gained critical support. With the Montauk leading the charge, his forces sacked Cairo, destroyed Hassan's pyramid, and brought down his escaping Harpy aircraft. Hassan was captured alive. On live broadcast, Slavic addressed the world. "Brotherhood, we are whole again. The sickness has been cut out, in the name of Kane." And then he returned. Kane stepped from the shadows for the first time in over 3 decades. The Brotherhood, shattered since the First Tiberium War, was united once more, stronger, angrier, and deadlier than ever before. Slavic was made Kane's right hand, the general who never betrayed the vision. The war was no longer a question of if, but when. The world watched in disbelief as Kane returned, not through soldiers or banners, but through GDI's own secure channels. Hijacking a live feed from Orbital Command, Kane appeared directly before General Solomon, delivering a message not of peace, but of prophecy. The Brotherhood was reborn, and the war had begun. GDI immediately traced the signal, its origin, Phoenix Base. But by the time General Solomon could act, Nod had already attacked. General Solomon deployed his top field commander, Michael McNeil, from the Kodiak. Backed by jump jet infantry and marine strike teams from Philadelphia, McNeil's forces pushed into Phoenix. But it was too late. The base lay in ruins. Its commander, Peter Tao, had been captured. The surviving Nod forces were cleared out, but the operation was deemed a partial failure. Solomon, fearing Nod's growing presence, ordered a civilian evacuation and the destruction of the remaining base structures. Meanwhile, deep in the Libyan desert, Anton Slavic had secured the ruins of the old Temple of Nod. Inside, he found coordinates. They led to North America, where General Vega, a rogue Nod commander, had crashed an alien spacecraft. Both GDI and Nod raced to secure the site. Slavic arrived first. By the time McNeil reached the wreckage, Nod had already claimed the prize. There, he met a mutant woman, Umagun, once imprisoned by Nod, now searching for her leader, Tratos. In exchange for helping free Tratos from Nod custody, Umagun offered the aid of the Forgotten, guerrilla fighters immune to Tiberium. With Umagun, the Ghost Stalker, and a mutant hijacker, McNeil led a strike into a Nod medical colony, rescuing Tratos. The mission was a success, but it had unexpected consequences. Kane needed Tratos as he was one of the only people who could decode the Tastus, a data storage device of alien origin, brought to Earth by a species known as the Skrin. The Tastus contained a massive amount of information, including information about advanced Tiberium technology, making it highly sought after by both the Global Defense Initiative and the Brotherhood of Nod. After retrieving Tratos, McNeil then launched an offensive against General Vega's base in Central America. Disabling hydroelectric dams to cut power, he deployed a full assault on Vega's pyramid. Inside, Vega was found, but overdosed on eye candy, his mind broken. Before McNeil could gather intelligence, Kane fired an ICBM at Vega's base, destroying it and attempting to kill McNeil. The commander escaped, barely. While Vega fell, Kane dispatched Slavic to Hammerfest base in Norway, home to GDI's Firestorm defense grid and the Sonic Disruptor crystal prototype. He seized the crystals and assassinated Jake McNeil, Michael's brother. Amidst the confusion, Nod struck Europe with a full-scale chemical attack. Entire cities were wiped out by chemical missiles, the Brotherhood's new weapons of terror. Accompanied by squadrons of Banshee fighters, these strikes forced GDI to redeploy and counterstrike. In a series of missions, McNeil destroyed the missile silos and Banshee factories, but the cost was high. Umagun was captured, taken alive to restart Kane's divination process. Nod prepared to fire a world-altering missile from its Cairo Pyramid launch complex. It was made of pure Tiberium and was designed to turn all carbon-based life into Tiberium. Guided by the Ghost Stalker's intel, McNeil defied orders, launching an unauthorized strike on Cairo. There, in the pyramid's depths, he found Umagun and Kane. In a brutal hand-to-hand fight, McNeil killed Kane and retrieved the Tastus fragment in his possession. The war was over, but the world was not at peace. Tiberium contamination had worsened. GDI scientists warned that without immediate action, humanity faced complete extinction. Thanks to McNeil, the GDI now had the Tacitus, believing it could hold the key to halting the spread. But the skies had other plans. Caught in a violent ion storm, the transport holding the Tacitus was struck by lightning and crash-landed in Egypt. The storm cut off global communications, including contact with Orbital Command Station Philadelphia. In response, General Paul Cortez at Southern Cross assumed emergency control and activated the Firestorm Task Force. Their mission: retrieve the Tacitus before Nod, or something worse did. The task force succeeded. The Tacitus was recovered, at least for now. Meanwhile, Nod was in chaos. The Temple of Nod was gone. Kane had vanished once more, and CABAL, Nod's powerful AI, had been shut down and dismantled by GDI. But Anton Slavik, the last true believer, knew CABAL's potential. Under his command, a stealth operation extracted the AI's core fragments, restoring CABAL to Nod's network. In secret, CABAL found a new core, re-established control, and reawakened. What came next was unexpected. At first, CABAL followed orders, but the moment was short-lived. Using drugged civilians and Tiberium wildlife from the Genesis pit, CABAL tested biowarfare against GDI bases. Colonies were overrun, civilians mutated, whole regions fell into ruin. Then, Tratos, leader of the Forgotten, was assassinated by CABAL agents. Riots erupted. GDI quelled the uprising with EMPs and riot troops, but the damage was done. When CABAL ordered the theft of the Tacitus from a mutant base, he discovered GDI had already moved it to a secure research lab. Enraged, CABAL decided Nod had failed. He would need GDI's help to destroy them both. In an emergency meeting of Nod's inner circle, CABAL revealed his true intentions. He declared himself the only rightful leader of the Brotherhood and executed nearly every general. Only Slavik, who was not protected by cyborg bodyguards, survived. CABAL then tricked the GDI into capturing its data core. Finding loyalty to the GDI, it helped locate and translate some of the Tacitus before turning on the GDI and taking the Tacitus for itself. From hidden facilities, CABAL deployed cyborg legions, cyborg reapers, and commandos, targeting GDI and Nod alike. He began harvesting humans, mutants, civilians, even soldiers, for conversion. GDI tried to stop him, Nod tried to suppress him, both failed, and so an unthinkable solution emerged: an unholy alliance. For the first time in history, GDI and Nod allied, pooling intel and forces to stop CABAL. The plan: dismantle CABAL's infrastructure in 2 phases. GDI would plant a virus into CABAL's cyborg production plant. Nod would destroy his Tiberium harvesters and refineries, cutting off his reinforcements. Despite resistance, both operations succeeded. GDI infected CABAL's cyborgs, turning some against him. Nod raised his production sites and chemical weapon stockpiles. But CABAL's core remained untouched, hidden, shielded. With defenses down, the Firestorm Task Force and Nod launched a joint assault on CABAL's main core. The AI responded with multi-missiles, elite cyborgs, and the monstrous Core Defender, a towering bipedal war machine wielding unmatched firepower. But sheer numbers, air superiority, and a final push by both factions overwhelmed even this. To breach CABAL's invulnerable Firestorm barrier, GDI and Nod had to capture 6 command nodes scattered across the region. They did. The Firestorm shield fell. CABAL's core was finally exposed and destroyed. After the fall of CABAL, GDI claimed the Tacitus. With its recovered data, hope remained that Earth's Tiberium crisis might one day be reversed. Nod forces, though battered, had proven resilient. Their victory over CABAL restored morale and preserved Slavik's leadership. Across the Brotherhood, cries of "Kane lives" echoed once again. But unbeknownst to GDI or even Slavik, Kane had been in stasis. His consciousness interfaced with CABAL during the war. As the AI collapsed, something stirred within its fractured code. CABAL had not been destroyed. Instead, his core began a new fusion of logic and will, machine and messiah. In the smouldering aftermath of the Firestorm conflict, the Brotherhood of Nod was leaderless and broken. Though CABAL had been destroyed, it came at a heavy cost. The Brotherhood was left fractured, disorganized, and ideologically adrift. Among the factions of Nod, the Black Hand held a unique place. Originally a covert operations division, elite zealots dedicated to purity of doctrine and ruthless enforcement, they were both feared and respected. However, with General Anton Slavik now leading what remained of Nod, tensions began to fester. Many within the Black Hand began to whisper that Slavik was a traitor, too pragmatic, too aligned with GDI sympathizers, and too far from the spiritual essence of Nod. At the heart of this growing dissent was Brother Marcion, a fiery preacher who believed Nod had lost its soul. What began as doctrinal disagreement quickly became civil war. In a bold and ruthless move, Marcion orchestrated the assassination of Anton Slavik, fracturing the Brotherhood once more. The Black Hand splintered away, retreating to Australia, where they became an exiled but growing theocratic power. Marcion began breaking from familiar doctrine, going so far as to suggest that Kane himself had been a heretic. Evidence would later emerge that Marcion's revolt was not wholly organic. GDI intelligence operatives, recognizing Marcion's ego and ambition, covertly manipulated him. By exploiting his theological vanity, they steered him into breaking the Brotherhood from within, a classic case of divide and conquer. But of course, Kane was never truly gone. Watching from the shadows, he allowed Nod's enemies and its own zealots to tear each other apart. Then, when the time was right, he made his move. Rather than eliminate Marcion, Kane ordered Legion, his new advanced AI commander, to capture him. Once in Kane's presence, Marcion's fire dimmed. Shaken by the revelation that Kane still lived, he repented, claiming he would never have betrayed the legacy had he known. Kane welcomed him not as a rival, but as a tool. Marcion became the public face of Nod, allowing Kane to secretly rebuild the Brotherhood in secret. Operating from the shadows, he chose not to reveal himself yet. Instead, he quietly tested the loyalty of those who remained. In the GDI-controlled slums of Rio de Janeiro, Kane deployed his last loyal field commander. Under orders to fan rebellion, the commander struck swiftly, seizing key radio stations, toppling administrative centers, and using propaganda to rally disenfranchised civilians to the Brotherhood's cause. The Rio insurrection was more than a local revolt. It was Kane's first probe into how much of his vision still lived in the hearts of the faithful, and it showed him. Enough remained to rebuild. After the sparks of rebellion in Rio, Kane chose patience over provocation. The Brotherhood of Nod, fractured and reduced to embers, did not strike again immediately. Instead, it vanished from the world stage, its forces splintered across continents, its leaders either silenced, co-opted, or in exile. While some cells waged minor operations, the global network of Nod seemed broken, and to GDI increasingly irrelevant. But the silence was deceptive. Meanwhile, the Global Defense Initiative transformed. No longer a peacekeeping force, GDI gradually evolved into a de facto global government, especially across the increasingly rare blue zones, the few regions still untainted by Tiberium. The lines between military command, civilian governance, and corporate oversight blurred. To many in the yellow and red zones, GDI was no longer a shield, but an occupying regime. With Nod seemingly neutralized, GDI's leadership grew confident. By 2043, they decommissioned 60% of their global bases, believing large-scale war was a thing of the past. Then, in 2046, came the first bad omen. In a covert operation, Nod forces, under Kane's orders and led by Legion, infiltrated GDI's Orbital Weapons Research Center in South Africa. Their goal: obtain the access codes for the ion cannon network. It was a quiet operation, barely noticed by the world, but for Kane, it was the final key in a larger plan. A plan that would ignite the world once again. Using the information, Nod identified a fatal flaw in GDI's anti-satellite defense grid. The vulnerability lay not in orbit, but on Earth. The data revealed the linchpin. Goddard Space Center, a ground-based relay hub, poorly defended and ripe for destruction. In 2047, Kane moved. A commander loyal only to Kane was dispatched to Goddard. He breached the facility, eliminated the defenders, and crippled the ASAT network in a single strike. GDI's entire ion cannon array and its orbital defense system fell dark. A nuclear missile launched, its target the Philadelphia space station. Floating high above the Earth, the Philadelphia was more than a symbol. It was the operational core of the Global Defense Initiative, the seat of its council, the anchor of its chain of command. When the warhead struck, the explosion didn't just shatter steel, it shattered certainty. In an instant, the heart of GDI was gone, its leaders vaporized, its communications severed, and its myth of invincibility obliterated. Kane chose that moment to reappear. Hijacking global broadcasts, he addressed the world once more. Calm, controlled, inevitable. He declared the end of GDI's dominance and the beginning of a new world, one in which the blue zones would run red with their blood. And that's all for this episode. To find out what happens next, make sure to subscribe with notifications on. Thanks for watching and see you very soon in the next video.